Hello, my name is Alex Ortiz. I'm a reporter with the Joliet Herald News here for Shaw Local News Network. We are here with the candidates for the 49th Illinois Senate District. The Democrat is Loughran Cappel. She is a teacher in Joliet. And we also have the Republican Tom McCullagh. He is a business owner you're from Shorewood, right, Tom?
Shorewood, yes, sir.
Okay, good. All right, so for those who don't know, the 49th District includes all the parts of Aurora, Bolingbrook, Crest Hill, Joliet, Montgomery, Naperville, Oswego, Plainfield, Romeo, and Shorewood. So thank you both for coming and sharing your views with the voters and our viewers today. We're just going to get started with a lot of big issues that people have been paying attention to recently at the state level. So first, Meg, I'm going to start with you. Obviously, one of the big issues that's been following the state legislature recently is the investigation surrounding Speaker Michael Madigan. And a lot of people have, including on both sides of the aisle, have said that he should answer to his ties to the ComEd bribery scandal. I've asked you this before, but I'll give you an opportunity to kind of explain your views on this. Do you think that Speaker Madigan should resign his speakership, his House seat, or his role as chairman of your party?
Yeah, I think that, the investigation is ongoing. And I think that if the allegations are true, then he definitely needs to step down. I think that high ethical standards, I'm a teacher and I'm held to a pretty high ethical standard, and I plan on bringing that to Springfield. I joke that, if we talk to a parent the wrong way, we get called into the office. So, we're held to a pretty high standard. And I believe that all elected officials and all officials who are paid with tax dollars need to be held to that standard. So that is something that I think is really important, that we continue to take down to Springfield. And if the allegations are true, he definitely needs to resign.
Okay, Mr. McCullagh, you've been pretty vocal about this. What do you think should happen in this?
So in March, I called for his resignation after there was a rape incident down in Southern Illinois, and then he gave the guy a $2 million pension. It's hard for me to, I do critical interventions for abused women, so it's something that I'm very, very for women's rights. And if my opponent hasn't stood up for women in that fashion, she also says she's against corruption, but she's taken over $200,000 from organizations that were backed by Michael Madigan. She's working with Harry Benton, whose #1 donor is Michael J. Madigan in his House race against Mark Batnick. So, she's saying that people are being held to a higher standard. He's listed as, individual A in the ComEd corruption scandal. And I just find it outlandish that she can sit here and say on her website that she's against corruption and not call for the most corrupt person in American history. It's crazy.
Well, Meg, obviously, I'll let you respond to that, but I also want to hear both of what you guys specifically would want to do to address these sorts of ethics, corruption concerns in Springfield on the legislative level. So, Meg, feel free to respond to whatever you want to there.
Sure. First of all, I have not received any Michael Madigan money. You can look on the Illinois State Board of Elections and see that I have not received any money from him. And I actually received money from working people, teachers, electricians, carpenters. Those are the people who are supporting my campaign. And, I do find it awfully perplexing that my opponent would accuse me of being corrupt when he shares a stage with a convicted, a governor that's been convicted of corruption. That's to me hypocrisy at the highest level. He's sharing a stage with someone that's already been convicted of corruption, while I've never met Michael Madigan. So I think what we need to do is make sure that we bring those ethical standards down to Springfield. I look forward to a panel that I think they're working on that right now, and the recommendations that they make to make sure that, we continue to uphold ethical standards. Listen, I'm for legislative term limits for leadership. Those are things that we can carry forward as we move forward in this. But, to accuse me of corruption when someone shares the stage with Rod Blagojevich is, quite hypocritical.
Can I just to press you a little bit on this, Meg? I think obviously, I don't know all the specifics of how much influence Michael Madigan has within the party, but I think the critique that a lot of Republicans have been getting towards is that he has so much influence that, whether it's a union group or another separate, political fund. They're also intertwined. That maybe his influence of power kind of touches all aspects of the Democratic Party and the party's supporters. So, do you think there's something to that critique, that maybe that corruption has kind of infiltrated all parts of Democratic politics, or do you think that that's a bit unfair?
I think that's been unfair. I've never met Michael Madigan. I deal with Senate Democrats. My connections are with working families, teachers, electricians. I'm not a career politician. I'm a teacher. I'm on the school board. I care about education. I care about working families. Those are the things that I'm going to bring to the table. And again, I mean, educators are held to a very high standard, and I think that's important that we make sure that we carry those same standards, term limits on legislative leaders, making sure that we rotate agendas out. Those things are the important things that we can move forward with. But yeah, I think that's false. I mean, I have never met the man, so I've had no connection whatsoever.
But you did meet Harry Benton, who received all that money from Madigan, though, correct? And all those organizations did give over almost $1 million to Michael Madigan in the last election cycle, the same organizations that gave all that money to you. So I find it, again, disingenuous that you're going to sit here and say, just because you've never met somebody, which I blatantly have met, Rod Blagojevich, we shared a stage and we talked about how Michael Madigan moves all that money from those organizations to support people like you to get in there who are a rubber stamp for those groups so they can continue to get more money. So, yeah, I gladly and I wholeheartedly shared a stage with somebody who's willing to come out and share how Michael Madigan moves all that money around and how he can sit here and tell us how Madigan's controlled people like you for years. And again, you didn't say one word about Harry Benton. You talked about, I've never met Michael Madigan, but you say you clearly have met Benton. You've been out there walking with him. I've got screenshots of the organizations and the groups you're going to be doing with him. And on his D2s, it's friends of Michael J. Madigan for pages. So again, you're associating with people who are definitely dirty. And granted, I was with somebody who was commuted by the president, but he's out here trying to defeat the corruption narrative in the state of Illinois. So I'm gladly working with that to end it instead of perpetuating it like you are.
Tom, I know you say you can see that you're associating with someone else, but I mean, if the critique is that she's associating with other people, I mean, isn't it not at least a little odd, the critique that, or your choice to have the former governor speak at a fundraiser in support? I know that the argument that you make is that he can shed some light on the malpractices, I guess, in Springfield, but at least from an optic standpoint, isn't that a bit of an odd choice?
It was definitely a risk for me to do that, but I mean, he's come out very strong, since he's been out of jail, and he's been talking about how sorry he is for everything that happened, but even he still thinks it was a political hit job on him because he wasn't following the narrative of Madigan, and that's how much power that one person has. And we just did another interview on the Next News Network regarding that, and we spoke for an hour in depth on how money transfers from different groups, different organizations, and they use state reps to funnel and flush money between groups, so Madigan's name's drawn off, and the down ballot or the different races across the state don't see that. And that's something we spoke to very plainly and very clearly. So in a race such as mine, where my opponent's receiving so much money from these different groups that are still giving to the Michael Madigan funds, he has to approve that money going out there. He has to approve where that's going to. And yeah, I did share a stage with him. It was definitely a risk for it. But again, I like talking to subject matter experts, and he's definitely a subject matter expert when it comes to Madigan and corruption in Illinois. And I think as a good Christian person that everybody deserves a second chance in life. And I'm all for giving somebody a second chance if they're willing to repent and make better and make do for what they've done in the past.
Okay, well, I'll ask you the same question I asked Meg about, what are the substantive kind of policy changes that you would then think are needed in Springfield, or I guess maybe for any politician, what do you think is a necessary agenda for them to have to actually be kind of above this, these allegations of corruption or ties to corruption for you?
Well, I love term limits for all levels of government, from all the way up. I think if you're in there for so many years, you have have issues with that. So I would love to see term limits. I would like to see like a third party independent group come in, like Edgar County Watchdogs, or another group come in and formulate a like a reformation bill for corruption and ethics reform inside the state of Illinois, to where it's not fair to Republicans and it's not fair to Democrats. Everybody leaves unhappy, and that's how you know we've got a good deal going forward when it comes to corruption, if nobody's happy with it. So I want to see us come through and really make the strides in Illinois that we need to make to get rid of corruption in the state. Those are just two of the major things that I'd like to see.
What, Meg, is there anything you want to respond to there?
Yeah, I just want to respond. Like, I'm not naive enough to believe that Rod Blagojevich is going to, who's been convicted of 17 counts of corruption, is going to all of a sudden, have, this truth about, how to fix the corruption. It's a little hypocritical to fight corruption with someone who's been convicted of corruption.
Okay, well, I want to ask you guys about a specific issue that I know has been talked about for many years, specific to the state in terms of the drawing of legislative districts. Obviously, we are in a census year, so that means that after those numbers are calculated, the state legislatures will use these numbers to redraw legislative districts at the state and federal level. Would you two both support a nonpartisan commission or group, or just a process of redrawing the state's maps? Obviously, Republicans feel that the Democrats being in power, they have put kind of put an edge for Democrats to win legislative districts at the state level. Republicans make these same arguments in other states. So, Meg, what do you think about nonpartisan drawing or redrawing of legislative districts in Illinois?
Yeah, we all know that gerrymandering is bad, and really no one party should do it. But again, like you said, neither party can claim innocence on the matter, because other states do it that are run by Republicans. But yeah, I think a fair map plan is something that that I would be for doing.
Okay, Tom?
I strongly believe in independent fair maps process. If you go to other states where there's Republicans in control, it's the same way. And I think that should be not only a state thing, but a federal thing as well. So across the country, because when you're elected to office, you're elected to represent both sides of the aisle equally. And we got to make sure that both sides are represented in all districts. So.
Okay. All right, now I want to move on to kind of the issue that's obviously been kind of dominating the news this year. It's the COVID-19 pandemic. We obviously have been touched just as much as any state. It's been turned our lives entirely. Obviously, here in Illinois, Governor J.B. Pritzker was probably one of the early governors to really announce some sweeping changes to our daily lives back in March, with the closing of schools and closing of bars and restaurants for indoor service. So I just kind of want to hear from you generally. How would you evaluate the governor's handling of this pandemic to date? Tom, we can start with you.
So it's obvious that the governor really cares about the people. He wouldn't have done everything he did and worked as hard and taken as many political hits as he did without caring. So as far as his effort goes, I give him an A for an effort, but I give him an F for implementation. Arbitrarily closing down Joe's shoe shop when Walmart's open to sell shoes is terrible. Having our churches closed down, where you can't go there to worship. When people are quarantined inside of a house, you can't even go out and listen in a parking lot inside of your own car and blink the lights in support for Jesus. I worked really hard to get the press releases out, to work with different groups like Illinois Family, IBI, and all the other groups that are out there to get the churches back open again. And it's, as far as implementation goes, like even right now, having parental choice for students to go to school. There's a lot of single mother families and single income families where the parents can't work unless children are in school. So the local school boards and the state needs to come up with an option to where children could go, at least that are healthy enough to go to school while parents can work and try to save their house and save their businesses and everything else that they can do. So A for effort, F for implementation.
So just a quick follow-up on that, specific to the school issue, and obviously I'm sure Meg will want to discuss this as well. It's just kind of interesting to me how we hear a lot of critiques about the governor and kind of overreaching for a lot of these decisions. But specifically on the school level, this is a individual district by district choice that boards are making. And if you just look at the recommendations, I was talking to some parents out in Plainfield the other week, and they argued that, the American, I'm going to butcher the name, but American Society of Pediatrics, whatever the group is, recommended that kids should go back to school, which is true because it's very important for the economy and all of the state country to work. But you look at the statement that groups like that make, and you read down a little bit further and says, but you have to consider all of the public health metrics, including the positivity rate and how widespread the virus is. And, up until, we still probably haven't gotten to the recommended rate, but up until recently, the virus has continued to spread, at least here in Will County and throughout the district, to higher levels that I would think most medical professionals would say is unsafe. So I hear what you're saying about the choice, and I know that's the argument a lot of Republicans are making, but do you think it would still be, at least to what we've seen so far, genuinely safe to put kids back in schools where they're congregating in larger groups, indoors for long periods of time, which is exactly what experts say is not good when it comes to preventing the spread of this virus?
Alex, I'll be the first to tell you I'm not a doctor, but what I do say is I stand for parental choice when it comes to vaccinations. I'm for parental choice when it comes to their children going to school. And if the parents feel the child is well enough to go to school and the doctor says the child's well enough to go to school without risk of injury, and there's only been 2 deaths, I think, under 20 years old in the entire pandemic. But if the parent feels that their child should go to school, I feel that the child should go to school. And that's the entirety of my argument. I'm not going to make health decisions for other families, but I will say that I want people to have the ability to make the choice themselves, because we live in America, last time I checked, and personal liberty is something going on. And if the kids aren't going to school and the schools won't give any options for children to go back to school, I think we should get some tax money refunded, because where's all of our money going that we're paying out of our taxes and our children don't have the option to go to school? So that's an issue.
To the point about young people dying of COVID, it's definitely more than a couple, even in Illinois. But Meg, would you want to respond? What do you think about the governor's handling of the situation? And if you want to just address the issue with schools, feel free.
Yeah, I think that we really, when this pandemic happened, we did not have leadership from the federal government, and therefore governors had to take matters into their own hands. And Governor Pritzker made decisions that I feel, at the beginning were very, very good. I think that when it comes to now measuring what's going on and in terms of positivity rates, and I think hospitalizations, I think, those recent mitigations, maybe we could have handled that a little bit differently. I am a small business owner. I understand the effects that the pandemic had on my own personal small business, because I'm not just a teacher. My husband and I also own a small business. So I understand the difficulties of that. I think getting stakeholder involvement, making sure that we have more input from, our local Chamber of Commerce and stakeholders and business owners is vital. And I do think, my brother's a pastor, so I understand the difficulties that put on his church as well. And I think it was good. I think Governor Pritzker kind of relented on that. And I think that he was listening to stakeholders, and I think we need to continue to listen to stakeholders when that happens. In terms of schools, where do I begin, Alex, as an educator and a school board member? Let me just tell you first and foremost that every educator would rather be in front of their class in person right now, excuse me, if they could. And I think that when you look at, these are uncharted waters. This is unprecedented times. And I think that we need to make sure that, districts were able to, given the guidance from the Illinois State Board of Education and the Illinois Department of Health, each district, and the guidance that we got from them, each district was to come up with a plan that best suits their district. And I think that in terms of larger districts, logistically, it was very difficult to, in terms of even our positivity rates going up, like you mentioned, with our high schoolers and our young adults, it was very difficult logistically in terms of what we were given, to be able to go into school. So, but then you look at smaller districts and they were able to go. So I think that the idea was that it is up to school boards and their individual districts to make those decisions that are best for the safety of their students and their staff. I'm on a school board, And it's never one or the other. It's again about listening to stakeholders, to ensuring that your staff and your students and everyone involved has input and feels that it is safe. So logistically and safety, it's up to the school districts to come up with those plans.
Okay.
Hey, Alex, I want to ask one quick question on that. You
Okay,
run the school board.
let me follow up one thing
Did
with
you
Meg
vote
real
for
quick.
the schools to be open or closed?
Well, so what was the question?
Did Meg vote for schools to be open or closed in her school district?
Well, okay, now I'm kind of curious.
That's a fair question. Yeah.
So just to be clear, you're on the Joliet Township High School Board, correct?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Second.
Okay, so I believe that school district decided to start the year with remote learning after initially wanting to go with hybrid learning when the public health metrics were not as bad as they became. But then eventually, and I believe now it's still the district is doing remote learning. So were you supportive of that plan?
I was supportive of that plan because logistically, with 3,300 kids per campus and hundreds of staff, it was very difficult with our positivity rates going up to do that in a safe manner.
And I've only spoken to a handful of parents in the area, but I know there was quite a bit of nervousness about sending kids to school, even if it may have been very difficult on their lives. But what was the sentiment overall in the district that you heard of from parents and teachers?
Overall in the district, we had a great deal of support. Listen, one thing that I'm very proud of is I listen to stakeholders. I'm a parent. I have my own student at Joliet West. I'm a teacher. I'm an educator. And I believe in listening to our stakeholders, and it's very important. And we have listened, and I believe, and I will stand by my vote, that we made the best decision for our district and for our students and for our staff. And I could go on and on about it, Alex, but I don't want to take up your time. But there's a lot that goes into that. And so again, we voted again to go the next 6 weeks. If positivity rates go down, we'll have to see if we're ready to go into hybrid. I'm very proud of what our administration put forward. We had a hybrid model with the ability to go to remote immediately if we needed to, and with the ability to go to hybrid immediately. And as our numbers go down and as we look at the data, because we are very data driven, we will make decisions according to data.
Okay. And Tom, I want to go back to you, and I have a question about data, but did Meg address what you wanted to hear there?
Yeah, she definitely answered the question that she voted to keep parents' choice out. And I know at least in Plainfield, 85% of the parents that had the option to voice their opinion stated that they wanted a hybrid option to begin with. I was wondering what the parent sentiment was before that, or if you guys even decided to ask parents outside of the board regarding children going back to school. Because I didn't hear parents in there. I heard stakeholders. So meaning
Parents
board
are
members.
Stakeholders. Parents are
Just
stakeholders.
making sure. Okay.
Just so you know,
Good.
if you're aware.
Thank you for saying parents finally. So, I mean, if you're going to say parents. Don't say stakeholders. I mean, parents are.
Well, I mean,
parents,
there are more than just parents who have a stake within local school districts, but I would think most districts gave some sort of survey to parents before making any sort of decisions, weeks before that, right?
We did. We had, and again, I can speak to Joliet Township High School because that's where I'm at, but we had a survey out in early June. And so we again, when you say stakeholders, most people understand in a school district that that's parents. So we had.
I just want you to say parents a few more times.
Let
care about people.
let her answer.
Yeah, you're interrupting me, Tom.
Okay.
So what I was saying is stakeholders involve mostly parents and students and staff. So most of your stakeholders are parents, which that's generally how it is. So but we also need to look at the data, and we also need to look at guidance, but parents were very supportive in that decision.
Okay. Tom, I wanted to ask you kind of about going back to the data points. There's been a lot of talk about this recently. A lot of elected officials, a lot of business folks in the community were very critical of the governor and the IDPH when they announced new mitigations to slow the spread of COVID-19 once our region, which includes Will and Kankakee counties, hit about 8% positivity rates for multiple days in a row. Um, Obviously, I think there was a lot of criticism across the board, and you know, I had trouble just getting some basic answers, questions answered when it came to how those decisions were being made. Um, but you and some of your fellow Republicans had been especially critical about how certain metrics were calculated, specifically the test positivity rate.
Yes.
And you know, I'll let you kind of share where you stood on that. But there was quite a bit of, I would say, kind of, I don't know, pretty strong comments. I think probably stronger than were probably warranted. You know, there were some very legitimate questions about calculating test positivity, as I mentioned, but some of your fellow Republicans took it so far to the point that, you know, this was kind of a dictatorial regime here in the state, and I thought pretty. I would think most voters probably saw that as inappropriate, because there was no, first of all, there was no evidence that there was any sort of double counting or fudging of the numbers. So I'll just let you kind of address what you found problematic about how the state handled those new mitigations, and if you thought that some of the critiques went a little too far.
I will say I can speak to what I said at that event. I mean, I will agree with you that some of them were a little bit too far, but I think they were more on the shock factor for what was happening. And there's a lot of outrage when you see an article come out of WJOL and other areas and the different chambers of commerce when they're talking about positivity rates. Let's say if yourself is tested positive 5 times and you're going to the doctor to get rechecked, those same 5 positive test results were included inside the pool, which increased the positivity rate, which caused the governor to shut down Region 7. So also in the same time period, Region 4 in Chicago had increased its positivity rate above the threshold of 8%. The governor gave them a 14-day grace period, and then he shut down Will County at the drop of a hat, which is what our biggest drawback was. A lot of businesses were hanging on by a hair. And then all of a sudden, you know, reduced income. Like I have a few friends that own restaurants. I have a couple other people that own businesses that were considered non-essential. They were shut down again. You know, after they were just barely hanging on, they were running out of their unemployment money. They were running out of the money that they got from the government as assistance. And because they were concluded test results and increased positivity due to multiple test results being counted for one person, and you know, they should have counted it per person instead of a group test result. So if there's 100,000 tests being done on 20,000 people, and you've got an increased amount of positivity, they should base it off of per person, not a group sampling. So that was my basis on it. And I know the governor did go back on a few of those, and they reviewed some of the numbers and they revisited the percentages. So there's some progress with that.
But the IDPH, in a letter they sent to the Joliet Chamber, they explained that when you count just positive tests, which they also count positive cases, which is just an individual person, but they count positive tests, which can include people who have been tested multiple times, that shows the most recent spread of the virus in the community, which gives them the best indication of, okay, how widespread is the virus. And, you know, as the Will County Health Department director explained on a call recently, they said, you know, it just as some person individuals can test positive multiple times, they can also test negative multiple times. So do you think that's kind of maybe distorting some of the facts here when it comes to, you know, far overrepresentation of the spread in Will County or anywhere when it comes to COVID-19 testing?
Like I said, I personally believe that they need to count it as a person basis. You know, when they're grouping all the test results together, even with all the letters and the nice things that they've set out and explained it that they have. But in the initial basis to shut down a county, you should have better things than some arbitrary results that are coming out that you can't even back up with any transparent data. So they're telling you the test results, they don't tell you how they're testing, how they're doing that. Then they shut the businesses down. Then retroactively, they explained how they did that. They should have had a long case before they took away people's liberties to open their businesses. They should have explained that well in advance of what they were going to do, how they were testing, how they came to this data, how they came to this conclusion, that we wouldn't have any public scrutiny. You need to lead with example. You need to show people and build confidence in the system and the things that you're doing before you take away their livelihoods and their businesses, is the only thing that we were saying at the press conference.
Okay. Well, I think there is some legitimate claims for more transparency there. But Meg, is there anything you want to address there? And I know you said you kind of you felt the governor and IDPH could have done better in handling that situation. I thought you talked about kind of bringing more people to the table when it came to making those decisions, but is there anything specific that you think maybe could have been done better?
Yeah, I agree with your, what you were saying. You have multiple people, maybe in how they collect their data. You might have someone test positive twice, but you also might have another person test negative more than one time. So I agree, there needs to be more transparency. But when I did my research and I talked to people, they said, yeah, I talked to some people at the Illinois Department of Health. They're like, maybe there are some situations where data could be a little skewed, but it's not skewed so much that it's some conspiracy theory, that they're just trying to close down businesses, which is what that press conference sounded like. So for me, I think, again, if people would wear masks and wash their hands and social distance, we can get our numbers down, just like what happened. And then we can move forward and make sure that, we can keep our businesses open.
Okay. I think it's pretty much where we'll end it there on that question. So, and just for viewers at home, obviously the restrictions were lifted back on Friday once the region's positivity rate reached under 6.5% for 3 days in a row. Okay, so let's talk about another big issue that's actually will be on the ballot this November when voters go and vote. And it's going to be a referendum on amending the state constitution to allow for graduated income taxes, called the fair tax. Basically, Democrats have argued that the vast majority of tax payers in the state will not be affected. This is just to potentially raise taxes on, I believe it's 3% of the highest income earners in the state. Republicans obviously have been very vocal against it. Tom, I think you're hosting a protest soon to convince people to vote against this.
Am.
Tell me, what are your arguments against the so-called fair tax?
So it was not a fair tax. We sued them and they changed the name from fair tax to progressive tax, graduated income tax. So what they're doing is they want to tax the higher income earners above $250,000 at a higher percentage rate than they would be taxing anybody making under $250,000. So what people don't know is that they can change those income brackets with a rules change, not a new law, not a new vote, with just a rules change. That income bracket can go from $250,000 to $150,000 to whatever they want. And they could also change those tax rates too, which I find outrageous. And then the Democrat Party, he projects the incomes, he projects the revenues. He stated that they want to tax retirement accounts with this. And that opens the door for them to tax retirement accounts, which Cappel said that she was not against back in her March Sun-Times candidate survey of 2020 this year. I highly encourage everybody to look that up. So we're doing a rally to say that we don't want to have our retirements taxed here, after this referendum, hopefully it fails. But if it passes, we don't want our retirements taxed. We don't want to have a higher income tax on the higher income earners, because therefore they're going to move out of the state. They're just going to leave. Then they're going to have to force and change those brackets back down again to break up that revenue gap. And further, I just think it's unconscionable to have another pillar of communism brought into this country. So it's, go from there.
Well, okay. So just to be clear, you said, if I'm understanding you correctly, you said that there's a rule change that only the state legislature needs to make to allow for a graduated.
No, it's in the House.
It's in the
no,
House.
They can change the income brackets with a rule change.
Okay, but I mean, the state constitution says that there has to be a flat tax, that all residents of Illinois have to be taxed at the same rate. No.
No, if you look at the progressive tax, they're changing the Constitution.
Right,
so
to allow to basically get away with this flat rate requirement, unless I misunderstand.
Yes, they said they would have to change, they can change the tax brackets to a rules change.
Okay.
Meaning the income brackets, Alex.
Okay, well, Meg, what is your stance on the fair tax?
Okay, let me tell you, first and foremost, it is in the hands of voters. So the voters get to decide that. And what I do like about it is that 97% of people are going to see some sort of either their taxes are going to stay the same or they're going to decrease. And I think it's going to bring in $3 billion, a little over $3 billion, which will help with our unfunded mandates. But let me just say this. The tax brackets are written in legislation and they're not changing. And it will not, and I would not be for taxing retirement incomes. That is just false. So I think I know what he's talking about. And if you go back and read that, it says that it's not necessary to tax retirement incomes because it was in terms of with the fair tax. So I was like, it's not necessary to do that. But I've always been against taxing retirement incomes. So, you know, with that. But anyway, and again, the rates are written in legislation. They're written in legislation. They're not going to change. It's going to help pay for our unfunded mandates. But again, it's in the hands of voters. So, you know, regardless, voters get to choose whether we are going to have this referendum or not.
Okay, that's just to be clear, you are not in favor of taxing retirement incomes.
That is, yes, I want to be very clear about that. I am not in favor of that. It's better than Tom's solution of cutting 10% of the entire budget.
Okay, well, Tom, I guess two points on that I'd like you to address. So first of all, to Meg's point about this being a voter's choice, I believe 60% of voters have to approve this for the change to be made. So, I mean, it's not exactly a small margin, but this is, I would think, the small d democracy kind of at work here, no?
Yeah, no, I mean, if it's up to the voters, I mean, there's billions of dollars coming in to help the progressive tax pass, and there's a lot of money coming in to help the progressive tax fail. You know, so right now it comes down to an education thing and which side wants to go through it. And that's really what it comes down to is we're seeing, you know, our republic in action or democracy in action with, you know, having amendments to the Constitution, and there's going to always be people for something or against something. But I feel that, you know, once people learn what's inside that bill and what's inside the proposed amendment and how that graduated tax can work, that, you know, a lot of people are going to vote against it. So, and I hope that they feel that way. And, you know, we're spending a lot of time on it, and I know a lot of races across the state are spending time for it and against it. So we're watching our system in action here. So it's one of the great parts of this nation.
Okay, so to make a second point about kind of solutions to our fiscal problems, obviously the pandemic and its effects on the economy notwithstanding, Illinois was already not in the best financial shape, but I guess short of getting some additional revenues, Tom, what exactly would you have suggested or what would you have supported to kind of right the state's fiscal ship again? The pandemic notwithstanding.
So Meg said that I supported cutting 10% across the board. I was looking at the Senate Republicans brought out a proposal to bring forth to start at 10% across the board and then negotiate from there on what areas we're going to add money to or take money away from. But I mean, the short end of it is that there's $150 billion in unfunded pension liabilities, and the pensions take up the biggest portion of our state budget every year. So, and I feel that we need to pay pensions. So those are something that's a debt we owe people, but it's how we can make sure that all the people who are paying into those for all these years get the money for it. So my argument's been, if all these people keep voting Democrat, then they consistently underfund the pensions, who's they had a Democrat control for years. Why do they still keep voting the same way if the ship hasn't been righted yet? So outside of growing revenues, which would be a progressive tax, I think that we have a spending problem in Illinois, which I know Meg blatantly disagrees that we have a spending problem. She thinks we have a revenue problem. But I know that there's plenty of places we can cut money, and there's plenty of places where we can, you know, redirect funding to pay for some of those liabilities a little bit better than what we've seen it. I just don't like seeing taxes grow. I don't like seeing our tax base grow, and I don't like seeing our new levying systems bringing out more revenues, which is just putting it on the backs of working people. I think we need to have fiscal responsibility in the state, and I think we need to have reviews on every budget line expenditure inside of the state to see where we can conservatively reduce those expenditures to help bring up some of the budget shortfalls that we experience here in the state. So I'm not opposed to taking anything off the table when it comes to reducing income or reducing expenditures to bring our budget back into control.
Okay, so you're obviously against a progressive tax, and correct me if I'm wrong, you said you're obviously not for cutting pensions, which I believe the state Supreme Court said was illegal anyway. But
well, it's illegal in the Supreme Court, yeah.
Right.
So we can't do that.
So okay, you say you're not willing to take anything off the table. Then what kind of specific cuts would you be in support of? Or what are probably the lowest pieces of hanging fruit here?
So I would support doing what's called bonding out for the pensions for our unfunded liabilities and put it to like a monetized IMRF fund or like a bond system that we can bond out those liabilities, then we can better structure our payments into the pension systems going forward. So that way we're not having $26 billion or $27 billion a year going into the pension system. So as soon as you take out that unfunded liability portion to it, like i.e. through a bond, and we bond it out, so that way we can, you know, reduce and have it be a publicly funded or privately funded bond system, you know, through the markets to knock out some of those unfunded liabilities. You know, that's a great way to relieve some of the spending options that we have inside of the state, and then maybe have like people come in like a tier 3 or tier 4 structure in the pensions and go to a different way forward. You know, there's a lot of different options out there for it, but I would propose a bonding out system for that.
Okay. Meg, is there anything else you want to respond to there? Please go ahead. And also, obviously, besides additional revenues with the graduated income tax, are there any other things you think the state should do or that you would support to kind of right the state's fiscal ship?
Yeah, I think, you know, most of what our state budget goes to is, you know, Social Security, healthcare, funding education. And we've done, especially let's look at in terms of higher education, we've cut higher education for the last 20 years. We've done nothing but cut, okay? And we've seen when Governor Rauner did that, the devastation and instability that caused. So in terms of pensions, that is a promise. That is a promise. And I've said all along that I will protect pensions. The reality is that we do need to find solutions, creative solutions. It's for our pension debt. And you know, I do believe that's where evidence-based funding, see, a lot of times it's really not our income tax that people complain about, it's property taxes. And the reason why property taxes are so high is because we pretty much fund almost all of our school districts through property taxes. And what most states do is they take most of their state revenue and put it toward school districts and fund education through the state. And if that were to happen, then your property taxes would either flatline and go down. So the reality is, it's how we are funding education and other things that we can kind of work on property taxes. But just to make a 10% cut on property taxes or whatever, even 5%, you're actually defunding healthcare programs for our elderly and education. So, you know, we need to come up with creative solutions to do that. You know, if the fair tax passes, that will help with revenue to do that. But then we need to come up with creative solutions to make sure that, but just cutting off the board is not the solution. We've been doing that.
Do you have any creative solutions in how you would do that, or just another roundabout answer for that?
Well, listen, I think I thought, Alex, I thought you were running this.
Well, I think she supported some solutions, but I don't know, is there anything else you want to add there, Meg?
You know, you can always find information to consolidate units of government, to find savings, and it's going to take both sides of the aisles to do that, and I'm willing to do that. But, you know, just slashing the budget has been done, and it's not providing solutions. We're still in the same situation. So, you know, we'll have to see what happens after November, but, you know, I'm open to anything, but I think I've pretty clearly stated what I think in that, so.
Well, Tom, I just want to ask you to kind of address the principle here of should higher earning Illinoisans pay more into state income taxes than lower and middle class residents?
Sorry, excuse me. Personally, I feel that if you start taxing the higher income people, that's going to start, you know, hampering some of the growth for those businesses that are providing a wider tax base for the workers that are going into it. So if you hamper and you close down a business, or you have a business owner who's getting taxed at a higher rate, who can no longer pay to expand his factory or pay to expand his, you know, restaurant business and hire in more employees, that would create a wider taxing base across the state, then I would be against it. I mean, I want to see business grow, and the more you grow businesses, the more people that get to work, the more people that get to work are more people that are paying taxes, and the more people that are go out and spending said money inside of the state, you know, inside your sales tax, gas tax, all those other things that can draw a revenue base from that wider people. So I'm personally against taxing people at a higher income, because those are the ones that drive and grow businesses inside the state. And I love hiring employees, and I love being a regional manager, and I love seeing, you know, us opening a new store and me hiring another 50 employees, because I knew that there was additional people. I can take somebody from being a dish guy and bring them up to $65,000 a year salary as a GM over 5 years, which I did in St. Louis. But I personally am against taxing higher income earners, because that hampers the growth of business. That hampers the expansion of everything. And we would consolidate our tax base instead of grow our tax base with more employees coming into the marketplace.
So what do you make of the argument to say, well, you know, obviously it depends on kind of where that business owner's income comes from, or how much he's making or she's making. But, you know, a lot of small business owners aren't making that much money, and therefore they probably won't be affected by this tax. And if anything,
Correct.
I would think that a small business owner would probably is very concerned about his or her property taxes. And, you know, to Meg's point, the Democrats argue that if you have sufficient state revenue, you'll be able to fund school districts more, which they make up a significant chunk of people's property taxes. Then local school districts, if they have sufficient funding from the state, can lower those property taxes, and therefore, again, that's going through a lot of hoops here, but on net, it could very well possibly work out for a lot of those smaller business owners. Do you buy that argument?
I don't. I flatly reject that argument. No, my apologies on that, but without apologizing, you know, even if we have the opportunity for that to happen, I still think that, you know, in a state that wants to tax sunshine and rainwater, you know, for them to change the brackets or increase the taxing base or put new taxes in place we're in a tax heavy state. And I think that if we have that progressive tax, the opportunities for more revenue growth from that side, which Meg said that she's clearly states she's for other options if the progressive tax isn't for it. So would she vote to, you know, let's tax sunshine? They want to tax rainwater at a different rate because it's putting undue stress on our sewer systems. No, we need to generate more revenue that way. I'm a fiscal watchdog. I do not want any new taxing systems in place. Our business owners need the ability to grow, and they need the ability to expand our market and bring more employees into it. And that will grow revenue, as we've seen across the national pace in the last 4 years. So I think Illinois needs to follow that model and not the added tax model.
Okay. All right, Meg, I'll give you the last word on this topic. So anything else you want to address?
Yeah, you know, the fair tax and a graduated tax structure is not some crazy anomaly idea that's put out by, you know, the Democrats. 32 states have a graduated income tax. Illinois is actually in the minority that we don't, which is why we don't have the revenue that we need for the 5th largest economy. You know, like you said, Alex, I'm a small business owner. Most small businesses will not even be affected by the graduated income tax. So I think in terms of looking at that, I mean, listen, you know, I had to raise 3 kids. I had to make kitchen table decisions. I had to make some cuts, like, hey, kids, we can't have cable. But my husband and I also understood the fact that we needed to increase revenue. And those are things that we need to look at. You can make some cuts, which we've been doing in our state budget for many, many years, and we're still in the same situation. So that's where we need to start thinking outside the box. A graduated income tax is not that crazy idea. Most states do it, 32 states do it. And I think in terms of taxing higher income earners, you know, that's 3%. And, you know, Adam Smith, who's the father of capitalism, basically said that the subject of every state ought to contribute towards the support of the government and as possible, the proportion of their respective abilities. So he was the father of capitalism. And so for me, this isn't some crazy anomaly of like idea when most states do it. So, and I'll just leave it at that.
Okay. All right. I'm going to start to wrap up your last couple of questions here. I just want to hear how you guys would navigate, if elected, the kind of polarized state of our politics these days. specific to your district that you are running to represent. It's, I would think, probably one of the more purple districts around. It is a genuinely a competitive district, hence why we're talking to you both for a very important race that both parties have been had their eyes on. So if you were elected to this seat, how is it that you would try to maybe calm down some of the partisan bickering, work across the aisle, try to come up with solutions that I would think most of your constituents would be okay with? And Tom, we can start with you.
Well, historically, even in the business world, I've worked with everybody from, doesn't matter, race, religion, color, creed, you know, I've worked with everybody. And I've always taken a whole house approach when it comes to fixing any problem. And over the last few months, I just met with Willie Wilson yesterday. I sat down at him at church in Chicago, and we were talking disparity issues. And he ended up donating to my campaign, so God bless him for that. And I was working with LaShawn Ford with K9s for Veterans. He's a very prominent Democrat House rep. We got the K9s, we got a PTSD license plate sticker passed through the Illinois, through the legislature. And I'm all for building bridges. I love going forward. I love talking to people about any issue. And I like talking to subject matter experts. So when it comes to something that I don't know enough about or something I want to work for, I'll talk to anybody to get anything done, because at the end of the day, my opinion and my personal political beliefs don't matter. The only thing that matters are the people we represent, because we live in a republic and we have to represent our constituents equally. And in order to represent them equally, we have to work with both sides of the aisle on every issue that's relevant. And that's the way I would be going forward with it. And that's how I've been my entire life. So I want to continue doing that with being in the Illinois legislature.
Okay, Meg?
Okay, couple things. First of all, I'm a special education teacher, and I've worked with teachers, parents, students of all different personalities, just across the board. As a Joliet Township High School board member, it's really important to me to make sure that we listen to all stakeholders. And that's important, because you need to make sure that you look at things from a broad-based perspective, which I feel I'm pretty good at doing. I'm also a small business owner. I understand the difficulties that small business owners have in terms of what's going on now, and how, making a profit is important. I've worked and volunteered my entire life in my community, my entire life. And so I've worked my entire life in the community. And I think that my reputation there speaks for itself on that. And I'm running because I think I can bring all these experiences that I have to the district and represent a wide variety of voices. I'm a moderate, and I'm able to kind of look at both sides. I'm able to take both sides, and that's what people like to hear. There's a lot of divisive rhetoric that comes out of Tom McCullagh's campaign, and quite frankly, that's just not who I am. I have friends that are Republican. I have friends that are far left progressive. And I think what I'm able to do is be that bridge, continuing to hear the voices of Senate District 49, listen to our stakeholders. I think that's what they want. And when I'm talking to voters, they're happy to hear that that's the kind of representative and advocate that I'm going to be.
Okay, before we get closed statements, Tom, since she specifically invoked you, I'll let you respond to that if you want.
Oh, I stand by my rhetoric. That's all I want to say.
Okay, all right. Well, let's just get to closing statements. I'll just give you both a couple minutes each to give your final arguments as to kind of why the constituents in Senate District 49 should give you their vote. Meg, do you want to start?
Sure. Look, I'm not a career politician. I've always been someone that volunteered in my community. I mean, I've only been on the Joliet Township School Board since 2017. And I've always gotten involved because it's important to be a servant, like a servant leader in the community. I'm an independent-minded, moderate person, and I'm going to work with everyone to do what's best in my district, because the people in Senate District 49 are moderate, independent-minded, and reasonable people. They're not divisive. They're not extremist people. And they want someone that's going to advocate for them, who can build consensus and make reasonable decisions for our district. And again, I think my experience as a special education teacher, a mom, a small business owner, a Joliet Township High School School Board member can bring that voice of reason to Springfield.
Okay, Tom?
So my name's Tom McCullagh. I'm going to give a quick one because I'm probably going to cut this out. So I am a small business owner as well. I do contracting work. I'm a former regional manager for a restaurant company with over 100 restaurants and 5,000 employees, and I dealt with a $100 million budget and a $100 million P&L on a daily basis. I'm also an executive director for Canines for Veterans. We train service animals for veterans with PTSD. I'm an executive director for another charity group that deals with homeless veterans. During the pandemic, I know Cappel was blatantly vacant for like 5 months. She didn't say or do anything online. I was out delivering mask shields to hospitals. I was in district, out of district. I was all across the state because, again, people's lives were in danger. And we were producing mask shields at Joliet Junior College. We were delivering those everywhere. We were giving out food to senior citizens. I was dropping groceries off for seniors that were scared to leave their houses. And then as soon as the businesses started getting shut down, we were working on to get those same businesses that were open, that were disenfranchised from Governor Pritzker's orders when he had a whole state approach. I was further working with, everybody, trying to get the churches open. I've been really just a strong voice for the people going forward, and I always have been, and I always will be. And I'm for parental choice for children to go back to school, because I think that, single income households need to have the option for the parents to make their bills. I think that businesses need to be open, and, vote for me. I will definitely represent all people equally, and that's what I stand for and stand by.
Okay, because I gave him an opportunity, Meg. I'll let you have the very, very last word here. And do you want to address anything that he said?
I kind of take issue with Meg Cappel was absent during the pandemic because, number one, I'm a special education teacher. I was actually working really hard to ensure that my students, my special education students in an under-resourced area, were getting exactly what they needed for their learning. I was on all hours listening to parents, mailing out information and lessons and activities for my students when they didn't have the technology available to help them. I was doing everything I could to ensure that my students were receiving the education when we were in kind of, was kind of like an emergency learning situation, right? I also am the caretaker of my 83-year-old father. So, to kind of be running around in the pandemic, not wearing masks and going to open up Illinois rallies was not really a wise choice in terms of something that I would want to do when I have to take care of my 83-year-old father, when most of the elderly were being hit very, very hard by the coronavirus. Further, my husband and I have a small business that was shut down. And so what we were doing is we were working very hard to come up with creative solutions for how we were going to keep our business open and what we were going to do to make sure that our customers were receiving exactly what they needed, and so that we could also bring in revenue and get our PPP loan. So Meg Cappel was not absent during the pandemic. Meg Cappel was working very hard and doing what a lot of other people were trying to do: keep her family safe, educate my students, and keep my my business moving forward in the difficulties of the pandemic. And again, that's the voice that I bring to Springfield. That's the voice that I bring.
Okay. Well, I have to end it there, but I sincerely appreciate you guys both for taking the time and participating in this spirited conversation. I want to remind everybody that the election is November 3rd, but early voting will be starting pretty soon. Mail-in voting is also an option. So Tom McCullagh, the Republican, and Meg Cappel, the Democrat, I appreciate you both. For more information and coverage on election, go to shawlocal.com and theherald-news.com. Thank you both for your time. I really appreciate it.
Thank you, Alex.
Thank you. Back to blue.